wrong. It's St. Ivie, South Bend. Last night, our chief science advisor for FQ won the First Source Commercialization Award, which we were very proud. His name is Dr. Chia Chang. He's the Bayer Professor of Chemical Engineering at the School of Engineering. They presented Dr. Chang, or the provost presented Dr. Chang, and then spent 5 minutes explaining what a great guy I was, which was nice, but it was really embarrassing and not true. And I turned to one of my colleagues and I said, it would be really great if he'd say these comments to a point where we actually do something. And then you can tell everybody how great I am. But what I'll be doing over the next 15 minutes is sort of explaining a little bit about FQ, but really what the journey is in terms of entrepreneurship. That is, where you start, and if we have enough time, where you finish. This is a very busy week for FQ. Yesterday we had the First Source Commercialization Awards. Today we have, of course, the Spark Conference. Tomorrow we have our 3rd annual shareholders meeting. And we have shareholders from all of the United States that come and visit us, as well as our board meeting tomorrow. So it's a big day for us. It's especially big because I haven't met my sales goals, so I'm expecting to get a good, swift kick at the rear end. However, I own a majority of the company, so there's only so much they can do. And then on Friday, we have an open house, and we're very proud about our open house. If you've driven by St. Joseph's High School, we're the sole occupant of the high school. We have our manufacturing facility established there now. Senator Donnelly will be there. Former Governor Mitch Daniels. Mayor Pete will be there. Tom Burrs, the provost of Notre Dame, and then Bob Bernhardt, the Vice President of Engineering, will be introducing us. So we have got a great week planned, but I'll tell you how we got started. I can remember which button to click. So I'm going to start with wow. I'm not going to tell you what this means until we get to the end of the presentation. When we first started FQ, it was 2008. I was actually Chief Technology Officer of Honeywell International, and I'd been tasked with finding a new technology for the company to develop. And I found something that was interesting here at Notre Dame. I just couldn't convince the board of directors to do it. So I went home that holiday season and told my wife, I said, I really hate working at Honeywell. I should step back a few steps. I lived in Zurich, Switzerland for 10 years and worked for a very large Swiss company, and sold off the parts and sold off the last part to Honeywell. That's how I ended up at Honeywell. And I really didn't enjoy the culture, so I asked her if I could start a business. And she said, sure, why not? Go ahead and do it. How long will this take? And I said, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, who knows? Not very long. So she gave me permission and we started off. At that time, I was just hoping that we'd make enough money to survive. I really had no other illusions about what we'd accomplish. I think it's important at this point, though, to share a important quote with you from Shakespeare. And this really reflects upon what it takes to start a business. And in fact, on the way here today, a young man gave me a ride who's an esteemed student. And he's been struggling with whether he should start his own business. And I finally just said, look, just do it. I mean, it's like Nike says, just do it. Stop asking yourself if you should do it. Just do it. But that takes a huge commitment. It means doing something that's not very comfortable. When you start a business, no one's going to give you a paycheck. You have to give it to yourself. Now, if you go to work for Accenture or IBM or GE, it's different. They give you a paycheck, you do a little bit of work, and it's a lot more relaxing. Take my word for it. From 2008 to 2009, we actually spent the first part of the existence of our company negotiating a license with Notre Dame, which would seem to be an easy thing. We also put together a business plan. To give you a little bit of background about myself, a long time ago, I got my undergraduate degree in mathematics and an undergraduate degree in economics, and then some years after that I got my MBA. So I knew how to write a business plan. I didn't realize at the time that I didn't have ESP, so I didn't know what was going to happen in the future. So it wasn't especially relevant. We kept negotiating the license though with Notre Dame. We started raising money. You can't operate a business without funding unless you're very wealthy. And I actually started off from a point where I might have been wealthy. By the time I was finished, I was not wealthy anymore. And we kept negotiating a license with Notre Dame. And these two things are sort of resounding things. We finally did get a license from Notre Dame after a year and a half, but we also got an invoice from Notre Dame for $150,000 that was payable in 30 days. Which was fine. I just was lacking about $149,999 to pay it. But we did have one other thing happen. The US EPA came to us and looked at our technology, and by the way, I haven't mentioned anything about it, but our technology is essentially a device that allows us to take a sample and determine the amount of DNA within that sample in 1 hour. That is from a raw sample to a full assay in 1 hour. EPA saw it and thought it was very interesting. It just so happened that the month we got that invoice, we had an EPA visit. I brought them here to Notre Dame. We demonstrated the technology could work, and the EPA wrote me a letter of recommendation. So I could take that to some very wealthy people and get money from them. The good news was I got money. The bad news was I got exactly enough to pay Notre Dame. I didn't get enough to pay myself or anybody else. Which brings me to the next quote. It's really about risk. You cannot start a company unless you're willing to risk something. And I always tell young people here at the university that the wrong time to take a risk usually is when you're 50 years old, have a 7-figure mortgage, a bunch of sports cars, and a lot of credit card debt, okay? Unfortunately, that's what I did. The best time to start is when you're young, you have a lot of energy, you're excited, you don't owe anybody any money, and you don't have a house and a bunch of kids. None of you will probably listen to me, but please take my advice. If you're going to start a business, do it now. Don't wait until you've got all those other things burdening you down. In 2010, we had the license. We had also designed some prototype biochips, which I didn't bring samples of them with me, but our biochips were actually about 75 millimeters by 25 millimeters in size, and each one cost $1,000 to manufacture. Now, we were hoping to sell these for $50 a piece, so we had a $950 problem, at least a $950 problem. We did raise another $1.5 million. I'm proud to say that F-Cubed has no venture funding at all. All of our money comes from private investors. These are all people that are fairly well off. They can afford to risk their cash. Our shareholders consist of people, my youngest shareholder is 23 years old. His mother is the president of Merrill Lynch Asia Pacific. She actually invested the money with one provision, that I gave him a job. He was just graduating from Carnegie Mellon University, and she was willing to spend a lot of money to make sure he had a job. My oldest investor is actually 93 years old. All of you have heard of the first product he invented in 1937. It's decon rat poison. He also is the inventor of the portable phonograph. Most people don't know what that is anymore, but it's a portable record player. The last commercial product he invented was the Furby talking mechanical doll, which you guys have probably all seen. He's retired now. He only has one business left. He prints lottery tickets for 26 different states in the United States. So that's sort of his retirement income. We moved into Innovation Park at Notre Dame, the building across the way. We hired our first 2 employees, the first of which was that young man whose mother paid me to hire him. The second of which was a Notre Dame chemical engineering student. I didn't hire the first one I wanted, I hired the second one. The first one went to the University of Wisconsin. He got a last-minute fellowship. So I locked him in a room and told him that if I wasn't going to let him leave until he found a replacement. And he thought I was kidding. It took about 3 hours, but we found a replacement. We signed a cooperative research and development agreement with the US EPA, and we proved that our detection process worked, and we had our first board meeting. All of our board members are investors in F-Cubed. This really gets to the point I made earlier. Old people like me are very wise and we can make judgments, right? Young people have the energy to actually do work. And that's one reason why I wanted to speak to the group today. If I can convince just one of you to try that out, that's really the economic engine that makes our country work. Joining IBM and GE is not what causes our economy to grow. It's starting new companies. 1 or 2 people at a time. That's how the economy grows. In 2011, we shrunk our biochip from being very big to being 7 millimeters by 14 millimeters and having a manufacturing cost of $1. It's a great product. It didn't work though. That was the problem. So it looked really nice. It just didn't detect DNA. So we had to overcome that problem. We also made our first batch of biochips here on campus. And we got an invoice for the fab time that included the time we actually used plus the time the fab was broken. So we spent a lot of time fighting with them over that. We hired 2 more employees, 2 people that had never seen snow before, one from the University of Texas and one from the University of California. And they moved up here in November of 2010. And a week later, we got like 3 feet of snow. they stuck around. They still work for us. I don't know why, but. And we raised another $1.5 million. We were able to detect our first pathogen. That was E. coli, 015787, which is typically what you find both in contaminated food and also in a medical environment. We started the process of detecting MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which is a bacteria resistant to most antibiotics. There's really only one treatment for it. At the present time, if you're admitted to a hospital with a potential MRSA infection, the culture that they use takes about 3 days, and they typically treat the patient with a very expensive antibiotic and put them in isolation. Our objective here was to make it possible for a physician to do an assay in 1 hour and make a decision then to admit or not admit. We got our first silicon biochips that were actually made for us by Intel Corporation, and we created a sample prep device. In our area of biology, or I guess biotechnology, detection of DNA is not that difficult. Those of you that work in the science part of Notre Dame can see equipment that does it all the time. Actually preparing a sample and detecting it within 1 hour is almost impossible. And that's one thing that we overcame. Another quote, this really gets back to risk again. Why were we doing this? Well, by the end of 2011, my wife kept reminding me this was only going to take 3 months. And she also reminded me that I didn't tell her that it was going to use all of our cash. So we were starting to wonder just how far we were going to go with this. In 2012, we perfected another solution to a problem we had. That's something called CNT fusion. We used carbon nanotube as our matrix, and we were able to fuse that to our gold electrodes. We took our system, which really consisted of 2 boxes, and integrated it into 1 box that made customers more happy. We took our 2-box system to customers to show them, and they didn't like it, and they couldn't figure out why. We learned a lesson, though. The customer's always right. So we integrated the 2 boxes. The box is called NESDEP. NESDEP is, NES is Hebrew for miracle. DEP is dielectrophoresis. That may sound like a stupid name, but the last name that we came up with at Honeywell was actually a product called Zariba, which is Swahili for security. There are no English names left in any products. You guys will all find this when you start your own companies. IU is not Indiana University, it's an integrated unit. After finding this name and trademarking it, I regret to this day that we named it that. But, we have since moved on to a polymer biochip. We actually make our biochips out of polyester. And we raised another round of money. We had our first fight with a contractor. We actually took to court. And we got involved with the Haiti program. In fact, the speaker before me was talking about it. We've actually shipped a couple of our instruments to Haiti for use in detection of something called lymphatic filariasis, which is the cause of elephantiasis. And this allows them to actually not test an individual, but test an entire village and then make a determination whether or not the village is infected, and then they can give very inexpensive medication to treat people that are in the early phases of that disease. And last but not least, when we first started here at Notre Dame, and this will get close to the end of my presentation, we were quite fortunate that one of the commercials that NBC Sports shot in 2010 was about us. The university gets a 2-minute commercial before the 3rd quarter of every home game. NBC gives the university a huge amount of money to film it, and they picked a professor on campus who didn't want to do it, so he had us do it. So this was a huge amount of publicity for us, and it also helped us get some more investors. The problem was that we filmed a doctor in Haiti. She explained how our product would help her treat patients. This was right after the earthquake. And we went back to her a year later and said, well, are we helping? Did we do something? And she said, no, things are worse now than they ever were. All the aid is gone, the tents have all fallen apart, our equipment is all broken. So we sat down and thought, what can we do to help these poor people? And I went to my board and I said, I've got an idea. Let's give them 1% of the equity of our company. And my board said, that's a really good idea. Why don't you give them 1% of your equity if you really believe it? So on December 31st of 2012, I gave them 1% of FQ. With the idea that when the day comes that Roche or Life or somebody buys FQ, the money that comes from that transaction will go to the University of Notre Dame. And I should also mention, I'm not a Notre Dame graduate. I'm not even Catholic, I'm Jewish, so this was a big deal. Last but not least, again, I was driving over today with a young man who actually took me to the Jordan Science Building first. and then realized he made a mistake, chased me down to build me, and brought me over here. And I shared this phrase with him. The key to starting a business is not having a great product. Okay, there are a lot of crappy products out there that you see every day. Okay, the key to building a business is having perseverance. If you're going to do it, and don't quit until you're finished. Now, that may mean sometimes that you fail, but you're never going to know whether you're going to fail or not unless you put everything you've got into it. That means all of your energy, all of your passion, all of your money. If you don't do that, then there are a few other things I have to say. One of the, I need to finish in 2013, we have filed quite a few additional pieces of intellectual property. We now have 10 employees. We are selling our product now. The old St. Joe High School is now called Hillcrest Hall, which sounds much better than the old St. Joe High School. So now we're at Hillcrest Hall. We were able to get the city of South Bend to buy our production equipment for us. So we actually have a lease where they purchased quite a large amount of equipment, and they lease it to us for $1 a year for the next 7 years, which is, for us, very good. We're working on our 510 application with the US FDA for MRSA. So this summer we'll be doing human clinical trials at 3 different hospitals around the United States. And we hired a new attorney. Our attorney is actually considered to be the #1 healthcare attorney in the United States. Every merger and acquisition that's happened in the healthcare field, he has been involved in. So that means that we're starting to think about exiting. How can we start another business? I should say this is the 3rd business I started. I started one in Zurich, Switzerland in the year 2000, and I started 2 others at the same time in 2008. I sold the other business in 2012, however. And this is the wild part, okay? I have not received a dime from F-Cubed other than the salary I get because I'm CEO and president. We did do a valuation with an investment bank, and they valued us at $103 million, which sounds really impressive, and my mom and dad were really happy to hear that. That and $1 will buy you a cup of coffee or Dunkin' Donuts, though. We haven't actually gotten the money yet. Just a few other things. We've got a media guide. I'll leave a couple of copies of it. This is what we're actually giving out to the press on Friday. One thing I can say is F-Cubed is the most well-known company in South Bend. We were in the newspaper today. We've been in the South Bend Tribune uncounted times on all the television stations. We were in the Chicago Sun-Times a few months ago. We get a lot of good press. We often sit around and wonder why, but it's free, so we're happy to get it. Summary, risk-taking is not the same as hard work. Taking risk means putting it all out there. It doesn't necessarily mean you've got to work 100 hours a week, but you probably will. All of you probably work hard because you're students or you have your own businesses now. Risk-taking is not the same thing. You want to make God laugh? Make a plan. And by that I mean put together a business plan. It's going to be great. I challenge any of you to follow it, though, without having to change it every 6 months or so. Business plans are wonderful, but just remember, they're a very, very loose metric. Putting it all on the line, that means you're an entrepreneur, okay? Entrepreneurs do not work at GE or IBM. Those are employees, okay? So if you get a paycheck, it means you're an employee. If you're risking your money and your life, that means you're an entrepreneur. Don't let anybody else tell you any different. Entrepreneurs are the ones who create jobs in this country. In fact, last night at the First Source Commercialization Awards, they had a woman whose name escapes me right now. She's a professor at Stanford University who started 3 different companies. And she advises President Obama on startup companies, and she said exactly the same thing, which I found interesting. Big organizations admit it. I was at a CEO conference 2 months ago in Jacksonville, Florida. I was invited by McKinsey & Company to speak, and the presidents of Roche, Life Technologies, and GE Healthcare all told me the same thing. In 1980, 95% of all pharmaceuticals and medical devices were done internally by those companies. In 2011, including 12-month acquisitions, 95% of them are done outside those companies, and they buy those products from other people. Big companies sell and distribute. Small entrepreneurial companies develop products for those companies and get acquired. That's how the U.S. works now. We're the hope for these big companies, and they all very much want to buy technology. They want to see what you're doing. They want to acquire it and bring it into their company. That's the future, I think, of business, and that's why it's important for folks like you to get involved in this. This last one, I think, just summarizes what you need to think about. We've had a number of interns working at F-Cubed. about 10 of them so far, and it's great. The previous speaker said something to the effect that professors like undergrads because they work for free. That's not true. We pay them $10 an hour, and they can only work 10 hours a week, so it's almost free, okay? But you really need to think about what you want to do with your life. What you don't want to do is wake up when you're 65 years old and realize you made a mistake, when you had an opportunity to do something else. It doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur, but it means you have the option of doing it, and you are students at a school in which that's encouraged. That's something they want you to try, so I think it's important to do so. Last but not least, am I going to do it again? The answer to that question is yes, I will do it again, and it's because I don't have any choice. I was telling somebody recently that I think doing all this has ruined me for corporate America. They would never hire me anyway. I like doing things my way. I like showing up when I want to show up. I like not wearing a tie anymore. So no, this is what I'll keep doing. In fact, the young man that gave me a ride here today wants me to start a business with him in Tanzania, of all places. I'm seriously thinking about doing it. So once this gets in your system, you'll never be able to stop. I just hope you have an opportunity to consider it and try it yourself. So thank you very much.